Are you stuck in the rat race, working a miserable 9-to-5 job, showing up every day to a depressing cubicle to do work that you hate? What if I told you that it was possible to escape that and live a very comfortable life with only $250,000 to your name? In the grand scheme of things, $250,000 is not that much money. It's definitely achievable if you work hard, save, spend wisely, and also invest. And what if I told you that there are actually incredible places that you can retire today with that amount of money? Not only that, but you wouldn't be getting a miserable lifestyle of poverty and deprivation, but you could afford a pretty comfortable lifestyle in many places around the world. So today, let's break down the top 5 countries where you could actually pull this kind of retirement off, and I'm going to include one from North America, South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. But before we can take a look at which countries might be a good fit, we need to have a rough idea of what the annual and monthly budgets would be. Now, retirement planners will generally say that you can safely withdraw around 3 to 5% of your total nest egg every year in retirement without seriously risking running out of money too early. So if we had a nest egg of $250,000, we could withdraw approximately $1,000 per month or $12,000 per year, and that would put us in the safe range at a 4.8% withdrawal rate. It's a little bit on the higher side, but it's definitely not totally unreasonable. And depending on the mix of assets that the money is invested in, it's actually possible that the nest egg could grow over time instead of shrinking. For example, according to this retirement savings calculator, with $250,000 invested at approximately a 5% per year return and a 20% tax rate, the money would last for about 44 years. But if you invested in some better performing assets, and maybe if you lived in a country where there was a lower tax rate, then you would literally never run out of money and you could live in perpetuity on that amount. Even in some of the most pessimistic situations, you would probably be able to live for at least 25 years on that sum of money in any of the countries that we're going to look at today. And in some of the more optimistic situations, it's actually even possible that your money could continue to grow and you could have even more than $1 million, depending again on what you invest in. So now the question is, what are the countries that you could retire in on a budget of $12,000 per year or $1,000 per month? And then on top of that, which of these countries would you actually want to live in? Because I'm assuming that even though you could probably retire in a place like North Korea and live like royalty on that kind of budget, I don't think that's the type of retirement that most people are thinking of. So in order to find the best matches, I looked at the data for what the actual cost of living is in all of the countries around the world based on a monthly average income. And we also have a map here with the orange countries obviously being the most expensive and the lighter green colored countries being the cheapest. And so the goal is to find 5 countries where the cost of living is below $1,000 per month, but also where you would actually want to live. Because even though you could live in places in Central Africa for like $400 a month, it might not be the type of retirement that you're looking for. And after examining all of this data, I actually found 5 good matches where you could comfortably live and that are actually reasonably nice places to be. So let's start with the first option, which is Mexico in North America. Now these average prices are based on a population weighted average of 144 cities in Mexico. So you might not be able to retire in the richest part of Mexico City or Cancun, but there's definitely some nice places where you could live on these budgets here. And basically with $900 per month, that includes rent, utilities, food, transport, and all of the other necessities of life. Now, aside from the budget being below what we're looking for, Mexico is obviously also a nice place to live. They've got a great climate, relatively cheap food and transportation options, and many people from North America end up retiring down in Mexico. Okay, the second country on the list is now moving to South America, and this is Colombia. Now, Colombia is kind of an up-and-coming country. It wasn't super popular a couple of decades ago for reasons that I'm sure you know if you've ever watched the TV series Narco, but recently Colombia has become a more developed place and people are starting to visit there a lot more and also to even live there. And based on a weighted average of 50 cities, the cost of living in Colombia, including rent, can be less than $700 per month. And just to give you a couple of examples, a typical lunch might cost you about $4 and a dinner for 2 might cost you about $20, so say $10 per person. Now, the fact that Colombia is coming in significantly below budget is great for a couple of reasons, because that additional money could either be used to live in a nicer place and have an even better than average lifestyle in Colombia, or to use that money to travel around the region. And remember, we're just looking at basically the bare minimum here. If you wanted to live frugally, but also comfortably, where could you live? And $12,000 per year obviously is not a lot, so you can scale this up to your heart's content. All right, now let's move across the ocean to Europe. Most places in Europe you would not be able to afford living in on $1,000 per month. But there are a few countries, mostly in Eastern Europe, where you can still live on that budget and have a decent life as well. And one of those nice options is Montenegro, which is actually a country that I have personally visited and was surprised by how nice it was. It is right on the ocean, and the average cost of living there is about $900 per month, so very similar to Mexico. Now, Montenegro is a much smaller country than Mexico or Colombia, so you don't have that many options for choice of cities, and these figures are coming from an average of only 9 cities as opposed to hundreds. Things like eating out or having a beer in a pub are more expensive here in Montenegro than they are in Colombia or Mexico, but you can get rent pretty cheaply, and that means that your total cost of living to live in Montenegro can be quite reasonable. And it's also actually becoming a more popular tourist destination. It's a really beautiful place to visit, and I imagine if you found a decent apartment or home, it would also be a pretty nice place to live. All right, let's move now to Asia. Now, there's actually a lot of different countries that you could live in and retire in Asia, well within the budget that we've discussed. I have selected Vietnam from the list, but you could also choose countries like Indonesia or the Philippines, and there's many other options as well. However, Vietnam has recently become quite popular as a destination for expats, and according to the average cost of living across 38 cities, you can live there on just over $600 per month, which gives you a pretty significant buffer in that budget and means that you can actually scale up your quality of life in Vietnam pretty significantly from the average and still fall under the $12,000 per year mark that we're going for. Food in Vietnam is super cheap. You can have lunch for less than $2. Rent is super cheap as well, and internet connectivity is great and also, again, super cheap. And Vietnam is now really known for its interesting culture as well as its beautiful landscapes and very agreeable climate as well. Of course, you could replace Vietnam for something like the Philippines and have a pretty similar experience in terms of quality of life and cost of living. And the final retirement destination that I want to include in this list is South Africa, because we have to represent that continent as well. And actually the cost of living here is quite reasonable. With an average of 36 cities, you can live for just over $800 per month. Now, the thing about this is you probably wouldn't be able to afford a nice place in, for example, Cape Town on that kind of budget. And so you would have to choose a location that fits the bill, but you also wouldn't want to choose a place that's unsafe, obviously. And so just like with all of the other options, if you scale up the budget even just a little bit, you can probably get a nicer place in a nicer neighborhood and still have a very reasonable retirement in South Africa. And again, like most of the other options on the list, the climate here is incredible, the landscapes are beautiful, and South Africa is also a country that is known for attracting expats. So yes, those are 5 solid options of places where you could retire with just $250,000 in savings. What do you think about this list? Would you actually see yourself living in any of these places? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.